Welcome to the Follow Podcast, where we're passionate about helping people go further as they follow Jesus. We believe spiritual growth is an adventure that never ends. So whether you're exploring faith or already a follower, we're so glad you're joining us on this journey. Well, hey, welcome back to the Follow Podcast. My name is Samuel Laws. This is Scott Williams.
Yes, Scott Williams here. The Follow Podcast is a great name.
Yeah, the Follow Podcast. We have been helping people in their journey and following Jesus, covering all different topics. So today I'm really excited. Scott was with us here at Life.Church speaking all morning, all day really, and we're putting him to work a little bit more.
It's great. Today's been great. Gatherings, as you call them. I love the gathering. I love that name, by the way. It's great.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I really wonder even how services became such a popular, I don't even know where we got that.
You know, it's always an argument at Life.Church. At Life.Church, we call them experiences. And so people are like, oh, you're trying to be all cool. Why do you call them experiences? I remember one of the executive leaders at Life.Church, somebody asked him, why do you call them experiences? He's like, well, why do you call your services? Are you like,
yeah, where'd that come from?
Are you changing someone's oil? Like, what are you doing? Are you servicing a car? Like, so I love that. So you're gathering and it's an experience. So
yeah,
gathering experience. And there's probably somebody else out there that's trying to find and follow Jesus, or that's at least listen to the Follow that has some other cool name.
Yeah. If you've got a great name, just drop it in the comments. By the way, I got to remember to tell you, please subscribe. That really helps us get the word out. You can also comment. We can try to answer questions, gives us ideas for future podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. But today, we're going to be covering the topic of diversity in the church. And
yes,
real quick, before we hear a little bit about Scott's story, I just think this is so funny. I asked him if we could talk about this while he was with us, and I didn't know until lunch an hour ago that he wrote a book. What was it called?
It's called Church Diversity. Yeah. Sunday, the most segregated day of the week.
Yeah, and he wrote this 9 years ago.
Yes.
Which was a really brave book to write 9 years ago.
It was brave. It was bold. And I knew that we were premature when I wrote the book, but it was one of the things people, like even agents were saying, Scott, like you shouldn't write a book on diversity for your first book. You don't want to box yourself in. But for me, it was being obedient to what God wanted me to speak on during that time. And now it's not as popular as it needs to be, but it's a very popular topic now with diversity and just kind of issues we're talking about in and out of the church. And so it's pretty cool to see that I was able to kind of be a pioneer in that discussion. There's obviously people that went before me, but we were definitely early on in the discussion. And it's really cool to see now that people are talking about the book as though it was something I had just written, last year. Long time ago.
It's almost like you need to re-release it.
I do. I think I'm gonna do that. I need to talk to the publishing company, see if I can buy my rights. Then I'll re-release it.
There we go. Well, hey, tell us, Scott, a little bit just about your story, background for those who don't know you.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm married. My wife's LaKendria. We have 2 kids, but I'll just kind of back up a little bit. That's where we are now. I love just start off by honoring my family. But I wasn't always a pastor. I didn't always get the opportunity to go around the world and share the gospel or to sit on a Follow podcast with people here. As a matter of fact, I spent a large number of my adult years in the prison system.
Wow.
12 years, 22 days, and 8 hours to be exact. So 8x10 cell, pinned up anger, razor wire, bad food, prison.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a warden in the prison system where Samuel, I don't know if he's sitting up here like, I didn't know that about you either. I didn't know you wrote a book on diversity. I definitely didn't know a brother was in prison, though. But true story, at the age of 25, I was one of the youngest prison wardens in the country.
Wow. And
it was at that time that, there's a whole lot of stories that led up to it, but that's where really understanding like this diversity calling, not only my experience growing up, I grew up on one side of the tracks and ended up getting saved on the other side of the tracks. And so basically went to the traditionally African-American Baptist church, got saved at the traditional white Baptist church in Oklahoma. And speaking of a funny story, like you didn't know something I didn't know. So my uncle was up here from Claremont, the town I grew up in. He was for, probably like a month ago. And I was sitting there talking to his friend that was with him. And she was saying that, I said, you know what? She used to work at one of the Baptist churches there in Claremont. I said, you know what? I remember there was this young lady that invited me to church years ago. She was a pastor's daughter. She was really cute. And she invited me to church, and I actually went to hear her. She sang. She was really, amazing voice. So I went to hear her sing. That's actually when, I got saved, and the first move of the Holy Spirit ever happened. Like I really felt his presence that evening at the service on the other side of the track at the quote unquote white Baptist church. And so all these years, like I just remember her name was Christy. And so I was talking to this lady, and she's like, oh yeah, I remember this girl, Christy. That's actually when I got saved. It's like, she's actually a big time recording artist now. So it's Christy Knuckles.
Wow.
Had no idea.
No
so like
way.
that was like a month ago. I just figured that out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was good. Shout out to Christy for being cute, inviting a brother to church. So now we can talk on the follow
now
podcast.
you can
It's
be
good.
the expert
Exactly.
on diversity in church.
Exactly,
She
because
invited you to the white church.
Exactly. That was it. That's exactly it. And so,
Wow.
And so that's where the conversation began. But when I became a prison warden, the one thing that I realized is that, the three most segregated institutions in America, number one is the church on Sunday morning, and then as well as prisons. Prisons are very segregated, but as a prison warden, I could force integration. Like I could make cell assignment, I could do this. And so I understood, but in church, you can't necessarily do that. I think there's things that we can do as leaders, and we'll probably talk about some of that, but I didn't have the same liberty that, you did in prison. I could force it. And so, but yeah, you would have the yard, you had the blacks would be here, the Hispanics would be here, the Aryans would be here. It was very separated and segregated on the yard. But in church, here we are. I mean, I wrote the book 9 years ago. Dr. King's famous quote was from 55 years ago or 59 years ago, however long ago it was, where he said that we must face the sad fact that on Sunday morning when we stand to sing, we stand at one of the most segregated hours in America. And here we are, 2019, in Northern California, not Southern.
No.
Inside joke, I said Southern California, and I thought it was going to be a riot earlier.
Well, now I know why you were expecting so much warm weather.
Exactly. I'm like, it wasn't warm. It's 44 degrees.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Like we've got seasons up here.
Exactly. I see.
We've evolved.
Right. It's good.
We've evolved beyond one weather all year.
Right. Can y'all handle?
It's just a shot at Southern California people.
Can y'all drive in the rain here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
No, we get enough of it.
Okay, so
Southern
they
California
can't
just
there.
dumps like 10 days a year. Everybody stays inside, or they get in car accidents.
Right. I noticed people didn't have parkas on here.
We're
at
actually
44
really
degrees.
good at driving.
Okay. Are you?
Yeah. So great drivers up here. Well, let me ask you this: why does diversity in the church matter? Why should we take it so seriously?
Well, I think that if you even look at what your mission is here at Brave, it's to help people find and follow Jesus. And so if that's our goal, people, that means, the same people that the Great Commission is talking about, like we want to reach all people, all nations. And so I say the reason why it should matter is because it matters to God.
Yep.
And so we don't want to let the fact that we're not welcoming or that we're not intentional be an excuse or a barrier that we can't reach someone that may not look like us, that may not act like us, that may not walk like us, that may not talk like us, that may not hang out at the same Starbucks or place or listen to the same type of music that we listen to, because I think that's why it matters, because it matters to God to help reach and find and all those people find and follow Jesus. And so if it does matter to God, it has to matter to us. And so I think that's it, because I think every person matters.
Yeah. Why do you think it should matter to all churches?
Right, exactly.
Why doesn't it matter to all churches?
Well, because I think there's a couple of reasons. I think number one, like there's three things in life that we're not supposed to quote unquote talk about: race, religion, and politics. Yeah. And so when we're talking about this issue of diversity in the church, like we're really talking about all of those things kind of front and center without the politics, but there's some of the politics behind why don't we have the conversation that exists. And so I think that's part of it. It's uncomfortable.
And most churches probably become at least unofficially known as a church for that political party, so to speak.
Well, I think that most so with the political party, it's like, I'm just known for this, and I don't want it to, and I think the more successful you are, the less likely you are to engage them, because I don't have to. I don't want to mess this thing up.
Yeah.
But I think the more successful we are, the more responsibility we have to begin to engage in those conversations. So again, I think it's comfort zones. Like we live in comfort zones. Yeah. And I tell people, like, it's a matter of being a product of your nature, your environment, or your surroundings. And so I tell people all the time, like, do what I call the cell phone test. And the cell phone test is to pull out your cell phone right now. You can try it at home and go through your contacts and look and see if everybody in there looks, acts, walks, and talks like you for the most part. And then take it a step further, look at your text messages and look at the most recent people you've texted, and do they all look like you? And so we're just comfortable. We're creatures of habit. And so what we're asking the church to do is get outside of their comfort zone, which in return we're asking the people to get outside of their comfort zone. But I think the church, they're the leader. People actually respond. They're a little bit more open than I think the church feels like. And so, but again, comfort it's just easy. Yeah.
So then what, as speaking to church leaders, what do church leaders need to do to navigate this well? Or if you're leading a church that isn't very diverse, what are some things you would suggest?
I think that the first thing, number one thing, is to go to Amazon right now and purchase Church Diversity. Sunday, the most segregated day of the week. That's a great
You're about
book.
to become a bestseller.
Exactly,
here.
It is. It's we're about resurgence, and we're going to re-release it. Yeah. But I will say this. One thing that I did do in the book is is I tried to answer those questions practically, like, because that's what people want to know. What do I do? Okay, Scott, you've told me that we have a problem. Dr. King told me that we had a problem. This has been a problem, just read the book of Acts through the lens of diversity. This has been a problem for a very long time. This isn't new to 2019 Brave Church, the Follow podcast.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do in there is I gave very practical things from what do we do from worship perspective. And what I did was I looked at the top corporations for diversity in the world. And so Coca-Cola, IBM, and so Johnson & Johnson, and look at the things that they did as it relates to diversity, because all of them, like, they have chief diversity officers. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on research. I mean, if you look at, probably 10 years ago when Coca-Cola was positioning himself with Sprite to be like more of a hip hop cultural urban thing, like, why is Sprite urban? Because there was a market they wanted to go after. And so diversity matters to all those brands because it matters to what? Their bottom line.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think diversity has to matter to us, because our bottom line is helping people find and follow Jesus.
Good. Yeah.
And so what I did, I looked at the top 10 corporations and looked at what they did and then drew parallels to what the church can do. And then so we just kind of unpack every single area about this is what you can do. This is the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But most important, like, you have to do something. I tell people, start somewhere.
Yeah.
Start having a conversation. Start by, a lot of times I'm the first African-American that's preached in the pulpit of a lot of churches I speak at.
Wow.
Start by, when you have a guest speaker, be intentional about having somebody that maybe your congregation might not normally get. And then if you swap pulpits with other churches, and again, I outline all this stuff in the book. It's been so long ago, 9 years ago, but these are just principles that literally, I think they stand the test of time. I think they're really easy things to do. But the biggest thing is just saying, I'm willing to take a step. I got to be willing to have these conversations with people that like this. Like, how do I have an awkward conversation? How do I tell someone that, hey, like, I don't have all the answers, but this is where I'm at. I remember Pastor Todd Mullins from Christ Fellowship in West Palm, and we were having a conversation. They were getting ready to start their At the Movies series, which At the Movies is, when you know how it is when you're starting a church series, you kind of got everything planned, all the whatever. But there was a lot of things that were going on with this time of the shootings, and it was just kind of everything just kept escalating. And again, it has to be personal to you as well. But he felt like personally he needed to say something, and so that's when he said, you know what, we're going to start At the Movies a week later. He went in front of the congregation. I remember his first words were like, I don't have all the answers. I want you guys to be able to show me some grace. This is my story. His dad was a coach. He talked through it. And man, I tell you, the church, like, people that I know that go there, they still rave about that being a moment that they were able to do something. Very similar to, because this is not just the U.S., Pastor Phil Dooley at Hillsong, South Africa, and in Cape Town, he kind of leads that whole South African movement. There was some issues going on there with race and ethnicity. I mean, and South Africa's 50 years behind us. It's basically the U.S. 50 years ago. But same thing, he spoke boldly about it, but it was the right time to where he felt like the Lord had given him a message and a word to share. Same thing, people in his congregation that are black or colored, they would tell me, like, you need to, like, listen to this message. It was, it was transforming, like, it was transformative. It was iconic for our country. Like, he was the voice that needed to say this. And so I think it's those things. It's just like asking yourself, what is this test? What is the step for me? What is my next step? You're not going to be down there. Don't expect to start doing gospel if you're an EDM or you're doing contemporary worship. You don't go that far, but saying, what is my next step? Maybe my next step is meeting with the pastor from my community and asking him, what do I need to be thinking about?
Yeah.
What can I do differently?
Real quick, do you want to tell every church leader out there what new album they should be doing songs from?
Man,
right
you
now?
know what? Actually, Life.Church's new album, and again, that's my church. I've been there for 20 years. I was on staff there for 6. The lead a life group there, so like that's our home church. And I think the word, and again, people are like, I'm a straight shooter. I keep it 100. Like, I'm not going. I thought the worship albums that they've done up to this point they've been okay. Been okay. But man, God's so good. Like, the new album, like, go download. It's really dope.
Really
like, I literally sent a message to a couple of the worship leaders saying, like, you guys are officially on the map for worship as soon as it came out. And it was great that your church was doing one of the songs this weekend. So Stephen Cole, who was leading that song, he was a worship leader at my campus for some years. And I mean, it's just, anyway, I'm excited for them. I'm happy for the church. They're all just great people. And it's really cool to see that a sound is coming out of a church that, that's kind of helped your family to grow and develop and to find and follow Jesus.
So let's talk about that a little bit in terms of worship, because it tends to be one of the most kind of polarizing topics in a lot of churches. How important is worship for diversity in church?
I will say this. First of all, I think the platform is important. And because one of the things I tell people is that when somebody comes through your church doors, number one is like, they don't really, if they're new, they don't know what's official or not. If I come to Brave and I see the people with the lanyards, as far as I'm concerned, those are official people. They're on, like, there's something. And so if I see somebody that looks like me that I can point my kids at that's official, that's a win when I come through the doors in some capacity. And then even more so when I'm looking at the stage. And so do I see somebody, because it doesn't have to be the lead worshiper. It can be the drummer. I just need to see some representation that I can point to. And for me, when we were coming to Life.Church 18 years ago, and we're trying to be able to point to my kids that are, like there's somebody up there that looks like you. When they're 5, 15 years ago, there's somebody up there that looks like you. And so I just think that that's important. Like visually, you got to figure out what that is. And I tell people it's not about affirmative action. It's just about taking the right action. If we want to represent our community, people got to be able to, like we're talking about find and follow Jesus. Like we need to point them to somebody that they can find and follow up there that they may be able to relate with. And I think sometimes the biggest misnomer is people think that all of a sudden they need to really like change worship style or change worship music. I don't suggest that people come in and start I don't think it'd be wise for you guys to come in and start doing gospel this weekend, but I think you're true to who you are. You have some diversity. Maybe you mix up one time and you have some spoken word. Maybe there's some piece that you put together that just shows that we're at least trying, because when you try and it's not a good try, that's not good. So do something that's genuine, authentic to you, your church, but that speaks to say, you know what, like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, this is cool that they had this, or they had these visual elements, or this was a story that was told, or this was the person that did the spoken word piece. And so you can interlace it there with so much. And again, it's not just black and white. Obviously, you got Latino, Hispanic, Asian. There's so many different layers to this conversation. Right. But generally, minorities find themselves and connect with other minorities. So if it don't have to be African American, but if I see somebody that's brown, like, okay, like, if it's an East Indian guy, like, okay, there's something there. Because a lot of times we don't know, even talked about like, with your wife, like people might not even know her ethnicity, like you see, but there's an assumption that you make of what it is. And so people can buy into 3 or 4 different ethnicities based on what they think.
Yeah, she's really blessed.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? So like so it works to your advantage. Like, so she can be Hispanic,
What was
Filipino.
your guess, by the way?
Huh?
Before I told you.
I probably thought Filipino.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, she gets that a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I thought, but no, it's not the case.
100% Hispanic. For those who don't know.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. What are some signs that a church is moving in the right direction?
That they've at least had the conversation with their team. If the leader's not talking about it, it's not going to happen. Yeah. This is definitely a leadership lid on here. If the leader's not talking about diversity, and nobody else is talking about it, period. Yeah. So, like, I think that, and as the leader, like, you got to challenge yourself to say, guys, we're going to have a conversation about what does this mean for our team? What can we do to be intentional? Yeah. And ask that question, and you'd be surprised at the feedback that people have. And then if you don't know, have somebody that's an authority on it. If you don't know, listen to a podcast. If you don't know, read a book and have some discussions about it, because the back and forth gets you to what's the place of what God wants to do here. Because you got to ask God, what would you have us do? But the biggest challenge, people say, I don't want to touch that, but they haven't asked God what he wants them to do about it. Yeah. Because be careful when you start asking, because he'll start to reveal things that, like, okay, well, this makes sense, or we can do this, or, next time we're going to try this, or, man, that'd be great if, if we'd love to have somebody that could do this or that, or we really trying to find, people all the time, like they're looking to hire staff, and just being intentional. Obviously, there's, you got to make sure, like HR, laws and all that kind of stuff. I'm not advocating anything outside of what HR is supposed to do if we're a nonprofit, but I think you have to be intentional with just as you're intentional with how you would do announcements, how you would do your branding. Everything that you want to be good at requires intentionality. Yeah. Whether we're talking about an athlete, whether we're talking about a pastor in church, whether we're talking about Facebook, whether we're talking about AstraZeneca, Applied Materials, or anybody else that's up here in the the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, they have to be intentional.
I just think it's interesting that so far, nothing you're saying has to do with style as much as being intentional to be a diverse church that loves all people.
Right, exactly.
And makes room for all people.
Well, and I think that's the thing, because when you're intentional about it, there's some things that you will do, but it's not like, I think people think like, well, if I start down this diversity road, next thing I know, everybody's going to come and saying, let's get rid of smoke and haze and moving lights or whatever. I do think I do know some church, for instance, that may have started out 80% 80% say white. They moved to about 50-50. And then they started doing more smoke and haze. I'm just being like more smoke and haze to try to shift the number to back towards maybe a 70-30 or something. Like,
Wow.
But, we always want what God is not sending us. Like, oh man, I wish I had more of this or whatever. But I just say that when you are intentional, you're asking those tough questions, you'll make some tough decisions. And again, both sides require balance, because you can be heavy African American, you can be heavy white just for the sake of argument, or any brown in between. And you just got to be, and then you got to look at the makeup of your community.
Right.
And so I think the community matters. It's not an excuse. And so I talk about these three different layers in the book, but you kind of got this local proximity. But as we know, people will drive 30 minutes to a church if they love it. So we can't limit like our geographic location, because people, if you got something that they want, they'll drive. Just like we'll drive for a really good restaurant that we like.
Yeah.
But there's some we want to go to that's local. We'll say, hey, no, I'm gonna go here tonight. But if it's a Sunday and it's an extra 20 minutes and these guys are getting it right, or I'm connected, God has planted me here, I'll drive. So we can't limit to just even our immediate geographic area. We just got to say, if we're being intentional, we'll draw from even further.
Yeah, I think there's a stat. We have people that come to Brave from 17 different surrounding cities right now. And that just blows us away that they're driving. Now, some of those, it's like, kind of far actually. And I feel for them. That's a drive. And then others, there's just so many little cities all around us that it's easy to get to 10. But that's a good point. I mean, that's not a problem. If there's something that people are resonating with and God's speaking to them and they're connecting, obviously we got to get some more Brave groups out there throughout the week. Okay, so...
But if you're not intentional, they're not going to come.
Yeah.
And there's some churches out there that say, man, I didn't do anything, it just happened. Those are definitely the exception and not the rule. The rule is you're intentional, and I personally think, my opinion is that God blesses your intentionality.
That's good. That's really good. So when is it the wrong thing to focus on diversity? Is there a point where diversity as a goal can kind of impede the missional goal?
Yeah, what you don't want it to do is with anything. It's just whether we talk about multi-site in the church. We talk about trends with worship. If you're doing it because that's what everybody else is doing, that's when it's the wrong reason to do it. If you're doing it because you think it's a cute thing that's going to allow you to have more whatever the conversation, or because it's the hot topic, that's the wrong thing. When it's the right thing is when you say, God, what's my mission? And for you guys, it's help people find and follow Jesus. So if you look at that, say, okay, if we really want to get to that, how do we do it? Reaching more people is a part of the goal, and it can't just be reaching people that look a certain way. And so when you start from that, if you're doing it for these other reasons and you're trying to make it be the main thing, because as somebody who started off kind of in the on the speaking circuit in the church world, was someone that spoke on church diversity. And sometimes I'd find myself in this group of all the people that are the diversity, like we want diversity in the church. And we're all in this room. I remember at one conference in particular that, there was a main session going on. Then the diversity folks, we were over here in the breakout session. And while we're in the breakout session, I remember one of the guys like, well, this right here that we're talking about needs to be on the main stage. And they're saying, people, you must do this and you have to do this and you do that. And if I did that, church leaders from around the country, if I said this, they'd have been turned off. And that's why you're even like, wow, aren't you supposed to be beating me up and saying I need to do this?
Yeah.
Because that's what so many leaders do. And so I told them, I was like, guys, we're never going to be on the main stage as long as this is your approach. Like you can't be whatever the church diversity patrol. My goal was to provide a resource that people can buy into, and we got to be encouraging, because God has given us all different callings, but if we're an authority on it, we got to be an authority that's going to attract people, as opposed to, it's almost, when I used to work in corrections, and this is a leadership lesson that I learned, I think speaks really well to the question that you asked. And we were in West Texas, and we were looking at some land to build a prison. And so it's me, the president of the company, and so it's the guy that's driving is showing the land. The president of the company is in the middle seat, and then I'm on the outside seat. And so the first thing they said was that's how you know that. So that's how you know that you're a true cowboy, is that I was in the middle. That's what it was. I was in the middle. So he said that's how you know you're a true cowboy. You sit in the middle, because I guess a true cowboy, he doesn't know how to get out and open all the gates and close all the gates when the truck is driving by. Well, then the other thing, we're out here and there's all these sheep out here, and there's all these sheep. And so I was like, well, so what do? Do they have a sheepdog that gets that kind of herds the sheep and gets them together or whatever? How do they, come to get the feast? Like, no. He said, we learned many years ago that's not the way to do it. He says, much easier. What we do is just put the feet on the back of the truck and drive. It's much easier to pull them than it is to push them. And so I think that's when we were talking about diversity in church. If we want to get people to
Inspire
be able to
people
understand
towards
it,
rather
let's
than
pull
try
them.
to push them into
because
it.
when you do, they're like, I'm not going to do it. I'd rather not even talk about it because they don't want to do it wrong. Like this is a difficult topic.
Well, and how often do any of us? You talked at the beginning about comfort. How often does anyone like to be pushed outside of their comfort zone versus inspired towards a loving motivation that I'm willing to be uncomfortable for this?
Right.
So let me ask you this in closing. What is something, not for church leaders, not speaking to churches, but for every person who's a part of a church that wants to do their part, what is one thing they can do towards becoming a more diverse community?
Well, I think the most important thing is education. Like, you need to be able to learn from people that don't look like you, that don't act like you, that may not come from the same upbringing as you, because when it may be reading books, maybe listening to podcasts, and maybe sitting across from people that you know, that you're friends with, that you work with. Because I like to say this, if you know better, you'll do better. And the thing is, and that's the deal with church leaders, and so for those that have been like, oh, thank you, Scott, you give me permission that maybe I can take a little bit slower approach. No, now that you know better, it's actually more of a responsibility to do better. It's easy to say, I don't even want to talk about it, but know better. So be educated, learn, have those tough conversations. I mean, we have an election that's going to come up that's going to be the most divisive thing ever.
Wow.
Ethnically, racial lines, get in and just learn, because once we learn to disagree and still be agreeable, once we learn that people will show grace if we just ask the questions, and the more educated we are, if you know better, you do better.
Man, that's great. Hey, I've really enjoyed learning from you.
Appreciate it.
And thank you so much for joining us, guys. Stay tuned for more to come. And find and follow
the podcast.
Find and follow the podcast. Also, you can check out Scott's talk from this Sunday on the Brave YouTube channel. So check that out as well. Thanks for joining us on the Follow Podcast. Wherever you may be on your faith journey, remember that following Jesus was never meant to be done alone.